The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the kindergarten classroom at Riverside Elementary, casting a gentle glow over the colorful alphabet posters and crayon drawings that decorated the walls. It was a Tuesday morning in early September, the kind of day where the air still held the warmth of summer but whispered promises of autumn to come. 23 children sat in a circle on the rainbow-colored carpet, their little voices rising and falling as they sang along to a nursery rhyme about the days of the week. But one voice was silent. One small figure sat perfectly still, trembling. Miss Emily Carter had been teaching kindergarten for 7 years, and she prided herself on noticing things that others might miss. The way a child's eyes would dart toward the door when their parents were mentioned. The subtle flinch when someone raised their voice. The forced smile that never quite reached frightened eyes. She had learned to read the silent language of children who couldn't yet articulate their pain. And this morning, every instinct she possessed was screaming that something was terribly wrong with the new student sitting at the edge of the circle. The little girl's name was Maya Rodriguez. She had enrolled just 3 days ago, arriving with paperwork signed by her grandmother and almost no medical records to speak of. Miss Carter had tried to make her feel welcome, assigning her a cubby decorated with sparkly butterfly stickers and pairing her with Sarah, one of the kindest children in the class, during activity time. But Maya had barely spoken a word since she arrived. She kept her head down, her dark curls falling like a curtain across her face, and she trembled. Not the normal nervous shaking of a shy child in a new environment, but something deeper, more persistent, more alarming. "Maya, sweetie, would you like to share what your favorite color is?" Miss Carter asked gently, trying once again to draw the child into the conversation. The other children turned to look at Maya with curious, innocent eyes. Some smiled encouragingly, others simply stared, the way children do when they notice something different. Maya's trembling intensified. Her small hands, clutched tightly in her lap, began to shake more visibly. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Instead, her eyes filled with tears that she blinked back rapidly, her jaw clenched with an effort that seemed far too mature for a 5-year-old child. "It's okay, honey," Miss Carter said softly, her heart already beginning to ache. "You don't have to answer if you're not ready. Maybe tomorrow." The moment passed and the circle time continued, but Miss Carter couldn't shake the image of Maya's terrified face from her mind. During free play, while the other children rushed to the block's corner or the dress-up station with shrieks of delight, Maya stood alone by the bookshelf. Not touching anything, not moving, just standing there and trembling. Miss Carter watched her from across the room, pretending to help 2 boys build a tower, while her attention remained fixed on the lonely little figure. When snack time arrived, Miss Carter noticed something else that sent another wave of concern through her chest. While the other children scrambled to sit in their assigned seats, eager for their graham crackers and apple slices, Maya approached her chair with visible reluctance. She stood beside it for a long moment, her whole body rigid, before finally lowering herself down with excruciating slowness. The moment her bottom touched the seat, her face contorted in what was unmistakably pain. A small gasp escaped her lips, though she quickly pressed them together, as if afraid of making any sound at all. Miss Carter's pulse quickened. She moved closer, crouching down beside Maya's table with what she hoped was a casual, friendly smile. "Maya, are you feeling okay? Does something hurt?" The child's eyes widened with something that looked like panic. She shook her head rapidly, too rapidly, the gesture of someone desperate to avoid attention. "No, Miss Carter," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm okay. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. Miss Carter could see that as clearly as she could see the alphabet chart hanging on the wall behind Maya's head. The child's hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the comfortable temperature of the classroom, and still she trembled. "Honey," If something hurts, you need to tell me, Miss Carter pressed gently, keeping her voice low so the other children wouldn't hear. That's what I'm here for, to help you and keep you safe. Maya's response was to turn her face away, that curtain of dark curls falling once again to hide her expression. I'm fine, she repeated, and something in the flat, rehearsed quality of those words made Miss Carter's stomach twist with dread. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activities. But Miss Carter found herself constantly drawn back to Maya, watching, worrying, trying to piece together the puzzle of this silent, suffering child. During art time, Maya held her crayon with a grip so tight it should have snapped, but she barely made a mark on the paper. When the class lined up for recess, Maya positioned herself at the very back, as if trying to disappear. And when Miss Carter reached out to gently touch her shoulder and guide her into line, Maya flinched so violently that she stumbled backward, nearly falling. I'm sorry, Maya whispered immediately, her eyes filling with tears again. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. The apology was too quick, too practiced, too fearful. It was the apology of a child who had learned that any mistake, any reaction, any sign of distress might bring consequences she couldn't bear. Miss Carter felt her own eyes stinging with unshed tears as she knelt down to Maya's level. Maya, sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for, she said, making sure her voice was warm and steady, even though her heart was breaking. Nothing at all. I just wanted to make sure you were in line. You're not in trouble. You're safe here, okay? But Maya didn't look like she believed that. She looked like a child who had forgotten what safety felt like, if she had ever known it at all. Recess brought new concerns. While the other children ran and laughed and played tag across the sunny playground, Maya stood motionless by the fence, her small hands gripping the chain link as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Miss Carter watched from her position near the slide, where she was supposed to be supervising the general chaos of 23 energetic kindergarteners. But her attention kept drifting back to Maya, standing alone, trembling in the September sunshine. Sarah, bless her kind little heart, ran over to Maya with a big smile. Do you want to play hopscotch with me? She asked, her voice bright with the innocent generosity of a child who hadn't yet learned to see differences as barriers. Maya shook her head, still gripping the fence. I can't, she said softly. Why not? Sarah tilted her head, genuinely curious. I just can't. Maya's voice was barely a whisper now. It hurts. Miss Carter was moving before she fully realized it, crossing the playground in quick strides. What hurts, Maya? She asked, trying to keep the urgency out of her voice. Sarah looked up at her teacher with wide eyes, sensing that something important was happening, even if she didn't understand what. Maya's face had gone pale, paler than it had been even in the classroom. Her trembling had intensified to the point where she seemed to be shaking from head to toe. Her lips had taken on a faint, bluish tinge that made Miss Carter's teaching instincts flare into full alarm. Maya, I need you to tell me what hurts, Miss Carter said, her voice firm but gentle. She reached out slowly, telegraphing her movements, trying not to startle the child. I promise you're not in trouble. I just need to know so I can help you. My back, Maya whispered, and then her eyes rolled back in her head and her knees buckled. Miss Carter lunged forward, catching the small body before it hit the concrete. The child was light, far too light for her age, and burning hot to the touch despite the trembling. Miss Carter's mind raced through her first aid training as she carefully lowered Maya to the ground, supporting her head. Sarah, run and get Mrs. Palmer from the office right now, Miss Carter called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. Sarah took off running, her little legs pumping as fast as they could go. Other children were starting to notice, to gather around, their faces showing confusion and fear. Everyone step back and give Maya some air, Miss Carter instructed, and thank God they listened, backing away in a small semicircle. She turned her full attention to the unconscious child in her arms. Maya's face was waxen, her breathing shallow and rapid. Miss Carter pressed 2 fingers to the child's wrist, feeling for a pulse, and found it racing far too fast. Within seconds that felt like hours, Mrs. Palmer, the school secretary, came running with the first aid kit and her phone already in hand. "I'm calling 911, she said, taking in the scene with one practiced glance. "Yes, do it," Miss Carter agreed, even as she noticed Maya starting to stir. The child's eyelids fluttered and a soft moan escaped her lips. "Maya, honey, can you hear me? You're okay. You fainted, but you're okay. Help is coming." Maya's eyes opened, unfocused and confused for a moment, before clarity and terror flooded back into them. "No," she said, trying to sit up despite Miss Carter's gentle pressure to keep her still. "No hospital. Please, no hospital. Grandma can't afford it. Please, Miss Carter, I'm okay. I'm fine. Please don't call anyone." The desperation in that small voice shattered something in Miss Carter's heart. Here was a 5-year-old child, clearly in pain, clearly ill, and her first concern upon regaining consciousness wasn't her own well-being, but the financial burden her care might place on her family. What kind of world creates children who think like that? "Sweetheart, we have to make sure you're all right," Miss Carter said gently, stroking Maya's hair back from her fever-hot forehead. "That's the most important thing right now." "But Grandma," Maya's voice broke on a sob. "She'll be so upset. She'll think I wasn't being good. She'll think it's her fault. Please, I just need to rest. I'll be better. I promise." Mrs. Palmer knelt beside them, her normally stern face softened with compassion. "The ambulance is on its way. Honey," she said to Maya, "but how about we bring you inside to the nurse's office where it's cooler? Would that be okay?" Maya nodded weakly, and Miss Carter carefully gathered the child into her arms, standing slowly. Maya weighed almost nothing, her small frame bird-like and fragile. The walk from the playground to the nurse's office felt endless. Maya's head lolled against Miss Carter's shoulder, and every few steps, the child would let out a soft whimper that tore at the teacher's heart. The other children had been corralled by Mrs. Palmer's assistant, their recess continuing under watchful eyes. But Miss Carter knew they would have questions later. Children always did. They sensed when something was wrong in their world, even when adults tried to shield them from it. The nurse's office was a small room painted in cheerful yellow, with cartoon characters on the walls, and a narrow examination bed covered in crisp white paper. Miss Carter laid Maya down as gently as she could, but even that careful movement made the child cry out, a sharp sound of pain that she immediately tried to stifle by biting her lip. "It's okay to hurt, Maya," Miss Carter said, pulling a chair close to the bed and taking the child's small hand in hers. "You don't have to be brave right now. You don't have to hide it. Before we go any further, I want to pause for just a moment and ask you something. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, whether you're tuning in from New York, California, Texas, or anywhere else in the world. If you enjoy educational stories like this that shed light on real issues affecting children, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. These stories matter, and your support helps us continue sharing them. Now back to Maya. The school nurse, Mrs. Ellen Bradshaw, rushed into the room, her reading glasses bouncing on the chain around her neck. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and 30 years of experience dealing with everything from scraped knees to serious medical emergencies. She took one look at Maya's pale, sweating face, and her expression shifted into professional concern. "Talk to me, Emily," she said, moving to the other side of the bed and reaching for Maya's wrist to check her pulse. She fainted on the playground, Miss Carter explained quickly. She's been trembling all morning, refusing to sit properly, flinching when touched. She's burning up with fever, and she said her back hurts. Mrs. Bradshaw nodded, her fingers counting the rapid pulse. Maya, sweetheart, I'm Nurse Bradshaw. I need to check you over to see what's going on, okay? Is it all right if I lift your shirt just a little bit to look at your back? The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Maya's eyes went wide with panic, and she tried to sit up, tried to scramble away despite her obvious weakness. No, she cried out, louder than Miss Carter had ever heard her speak. No, please don't. You can't. Please. Miss Carter moved on instinct, wrapping her arms around the child to keep her from falling off the narrow bed. Maya, honey, we're trying to help you. Nobody's going to hurt you. Grandma said not to let anyone see, Maya sobbed, and the words came tumbling out now, faster and more desperate. She said it's getting better. She said I just have to be patient. She said if anyone finds out, they'll take me away. Please, Miss Carter, please don't let them take me away from Grandma. She's all I have. My mama's gone and my daddy's gone, and if they take Grandma too, I'll have nobody. Nobody. The words hung in the air like shattered glass, each fragment cutting deeper than the last. Miss Carter felt tears streaming down her own face now, no longer able to maintain the professional distance she'd been taught to keep. Mrs. Bradshaw's expression had hardened into something grim and determined. Maya, look at me, Mrs. Bradshaw said, her voice gentle but firm. Nobody is going to take you away from your grandmother for being sick. But if you're hurt, if you're in pain, we need to help you. That's our job. That's what adults are supposed to do for children. We take care of you. Maya was crying too hard to respond now, her small body shaking with sobs that seemed too big for her tiny frame. Miss Carter held her, rocking slightly, making soft shushing sounds, and wondered what kind of hell this child had been living through. What had her grandmother told her? What had Maya endured that made her more afraid of seeking help than of suffering in silence? Maya, I'm going to be very honest with you, Mrs. Bradshaw continued, sitting on the edge of the bed. The ambulance is coming. The paramedics are going to need to see what's wrong so they can help you. I know you're scared. I know you're worried about your grandma. But right now, your health is the most important thing. Can you trust us to do what's right? The question seemed to break something in Maya. Her sobs quieted to hiccuping breaths, and she looked up at Miss Carter with eyes that held more pain and weariness than any child's eyes should ever contain. It hurts so much, she whispered. It hurts all the time. I tried to be good. I tried not to cry. But it hurts so much. I know, baby, Miss Carter murmured, smoothing the child's damp hair back. I know it does. But we're going to make it better, okay? We're going to help you. Maya closed her eyes, and after a long moment, she gave the smallest nod. Mrs. Bradshaw looked at Miss Carter, and some unspoken communication passed between them. The nurse reached for the hem of Maya's pink uniform shirt, lifting it slowly, carefully, while Miss Carter held the child's hand and whispered reassurances. What they saw beneath that shirt made both women gasp. Maya's back was covered in crude, homemade bandages, strips of what looked like old bedsheets and dish towels wrapped around her small torso and held in place with tape that was losing its adhesive. The fabric was stained with yellow and brown, the unmistakable signs of infection and drainage. Where the bandages had slipped, raw, angry skin was visible, patches of red and white that wept clear fluid. The smell that rose from the wounds was sickly sweet, the odor of infection that had been festering for far too long. Miss Carter's hand flew to her mouth, and tears spilled over despite her efforts to remain calm for Maya's sake. Mrs. Bradshaw's face had gone pale, her professional composure cracking as she took in the extent of what this child had been enduring. Neither woman spoke for a moment, both too shocked, too horrified by what they were seeing. "Oh, Maya," Mrs. Bradshaw finally breathed. "Oh, sweetheart, how long have you been hurt like this?" Maya's voice was so small it was almost inaudible. "Since the summer. It was an accident. Grandma was making soup and I was playing too close to the stove and the pot tipped over. The water was really hot. Grandma tried to help. She put ice on it and then she wrapped it up. She said it would get better. She said we couldn't go to the hospital because we don't have the money. She said she'd take care of me." The door burst open then, and two paramedics entered with their equipment, their expressions professional and focused. Mrs. Bradshaw stood and immediately began briefing them, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. 5-year-old female, 2nd or 3rd degree burns to the back and sides, improperly treated, showing signs of severe infection. She's febrile and was unconscious on the playground approximately 10 minutes ago. The paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, but even they couldn't hide their reaction when they saw Maya's back. The older of the two, a man with graying hair and a kind face, knelt beside the bed. "Hi there, Maya. My name is Tom, and this is my partner, Lisa. We're going to help you feel better, okay? But we need to take you to the hospital to do that properly. Is that all right with you?" Maya looked at Miss Carter with desperate, pleading eyes. "Will you come with me?" "Please, I'm scared." Miss Carter's heart shattered completely. "Of course I will, honey. I'm not going to leave you." She looked at Tom, who nodded. "You can ride in the ambulance with her." As they prepared to move Maya onto the stretcher, as Lisa started an IV line with gentle expertise, and Tom radioed ahead to the hospital, Miss Carter's mind was racing. She needed to call Maya's grandmother. She needed to document everything she'd seen. She needed to report this to Child Protective Services because that's what the law required, even though she could already see how this might unfold. An elderly woman trying to care for her granddaughter with no resources, no help, no safety net. A tragic accident compounded by poverty and fear, and a broken system that left vulnerable people to fall through the cracks. Mrs. Palmer appeared in the doorway, her phone in hand. "I have the grandmother's number from the enrollment forms. Should I call her?" "Yes," Mrs. Bradshaw said. "Tell her Maya has been taken to County General Hospital, and then call Department of Child and Family Services. They need to be notified." The words made Maya cry out again, a sound of pure anguish. "No, please, they'll take me away, you promised." "Maya, listen to me," Miss Carter said firmly, cupping the child's face in her hands and making sure she had her attention. "Whatever happens, I will not let you face it alone. Do you hear me? I will be there. I will fight for you. But right now, we have to get you to the hospital and get you well. That's the most important thing. Can you trust me?" Maya stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for something. Whatever she found there must have been enough, because she finally nodded and allowed herself to be lifted onto the stretcher. Miss Carter held her hand the entire time during the walk through the school hallways where curious faces peered from classroom doorways, during the transfer into the ambulance where the equipment beeped and hummed, during the drive to the hospital where Maya drifted in and out of consciousness, her small hand gripping Miss Carter's with surprising strength. In the emergency room, things happened quickly. Doctors and nurses descended on them, asking rapid-fire questions that Miss Carter did her best to answer. Maya was taken for X-rays and a CT scan. Cultures were taken from the wounds. Antibiotics were started. A pediatric surgeon was called. And through it all, Maya kept asking the same question. "Where's Grandma? When is Grandma coming?" Miss Carter had no answer. She sat in a plastic chair beside Maya's hospital bed, still holding that small hand, and wondered where Maria Rodriguez was, whether she'd gotten the message, whether she was terrified or angry, or too poor to afford the bus fare to the hospital. She wondered what would happen when the social workers arrived, as they inevitably would. She wondered how a system meant to protect children would handle this situation, whether they would see it for what it really was, a tragedy born of poverty and lack of resources, or whether they would only see neglect that demanded consequences. The door opened, and a woman in her late 60s burst into the room, her face lined with age and worry, her clothes worn but clean. Her eyes immediately finding and locking onto the small figure in the hospital bed. "Maya!" she cried out, rushing forward. "Mi niña, mi amor, what happened?" Maya's face transformed. Despite the pain, despite the fear, despite everything, she smiled. "Grandma," she whispered, reaching out with her free hand. Maria Rodriguez reached the bedside and took that hand, tears streaming down her weathered face. She looked at Miss Carter, and in that look was a mixture of gratitude and terror and guilt that made the teacher's heart ache. "Thank you for staying with her," Maria said, her accent thick with emotion. "Thank you for not leaving her alone." Miss Carter nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She watched as Maria bent over her granddaughter, murmuring in Spanish, pressing kisses to Maya's forehead, her hands trembling as they stroked the child's hair. The love between them was palpable, filling the sterile hospital room with a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. This was no monster, no abuser. This was a woman who loved her grandchild desperately and had made terrible decisions out of fear and desperation. A doctor entered then, a tall woman with her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and a tablet computer under her arm. Her name tag read Dr. Patricia Singh, Pediatric Surgery. Her expression was professional but not unkind as she took in the scene before her. "Mrs. Rodriguez?" she asked, and Maria straightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "Yes, I'm Maya's grandmother. I have custody. Her mother, my daughter, she died 2 years ago. Cancer. And the father, he left before Maya was even born. It's just me and her. Just us." The words tumbled out in a rush, defensive and desperate. Dr. Singh nodded slowly. "I see. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to talk to you about Maya's condition. Her injuries are quite severe. She has second and third degree burns covering approximately 15% of her body, primarily on her back and left side. Those burns have become severely infected. The infection has entered her bloodstream, which is why she collapsed today. She's developed sepsis, which is a very serious condition." Maria's face crumbled, her hand flying to her mouth. No, I tried to take care of her. I cleaned the wounds every day. I changed the bandages. I used the antibiotic cream from the pharmacy. I did everything I could. "When did this injury occur?" Dr. Singh asked, her tone neutral, but Miss Carter could see her making notes on her tablet. "Late July," Maria whispered. "It was an accident. She was playing in the kitchen while I was cooking. I told her to stay back, but she's 5, you know? She doesn't always listen. The pot of soup tipped over. The water went down her back. I put her in cold water right away. I did everything the internet said to do, but I couldn't afford the emergency room. Do you know how much they charge? I'm on disability. I get $700 a month. That's all we have. The rent alone is $500. How am I supposed to pay thousands of dollars for a hospital?" The desperation in her voice echoed off the walls. Miss Carter felt her chest tighten with the injustice of it all. Here was a woman forced to choose between proper medical care for her granddaughter and keeping a roof over their heads. What kind of society creates these impossible choices? "Mrs. Rodriguez, I understand your financial concerns," Dr. Singh said carefully, "but burns of this severity require immediate professional medical attention. The risk of infection is extremely high, and without proper treatment, burns like these can lead to permanent scarring, contractures that limit movement, and as we're seeing now, life-threatening infections. Maya is a very sick little girl. I know, Maria sobbed, her composure completely shattered now. I know I should have brought her in. Every day I looked at those wounds and I knew, but I was so scared of the bills, scared that they would say I was a bad guardian and take her away from me. She's all I have left of my daughter. She's my whole world. I thought I could fix it myself. I thought if I just kept the wounds clean and covered, if I just gave it time, it would heal. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But I love her. Please believe me, I love her more than anything. Miss Carter stood then, moving around the bed to stand beside Maria. She placed a gentle hand on the older woman's shaking shoulder. I can see that you love her, she said softly. Anyone can see that. Dr. Singh's expression had softened slightly, but her voice remained professional. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to inform you that in cases like this, we are required by law to report to Child Protective Services. A social worker will need to come and evaluate the situation. Maria's knees seemed to give out, and she would have fallen if Miss Carter hadn't been there to support her. Please, no, she begged. Please don't take her from me. I'll do anything. I'll find the money somehow. I'll do whatever you tell me. Just please don't take my baby away. The door opened again, and a woman in her 40s entered, wearing business casual clothing and carrying a leather folder. Her expression was kind but serious, the face of someone who had seen too much suffering and had learned to maintain boundaries to survive it. I'm Jennifer Walsh from Child Protective Services. I was called about a possible case of medical neglect. The words hung in the air like an executioner's sentence. Maya, who had been drifting in and out of consciousness, suddenly became fully alert, her eyes wide with terror. No, she screamed, her voice raw. You can't take me. Grandma, don't let them take me. Miss Carter felt tears streaming down her face again as she watched the scene unfold. Maria was clutching Maya's hand like a lifeline, both of them crying, both of them terrified. Jennifer Walsh stood at the foot of the bed, her clipboard in hand, her face carefully neutral as she observed. Mrs. Rodriguez, I need to ask you some questions, Jennifer said, pulling a chair closer. First, let me be clear that my primary concern is Maya's well-being. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to make sure that Maya is safe and that her needs are being met. Over the next 20 minutes, Jennifer asked questions and Maria answered them, her voice breaking repeatedly as she detailed their life. She told them about her daughter's death, about taking in Maya when there was no one else. She told them about her disability, a back injury from years of factory work that left her in constant pain and unable to hold down a job. She told them about the studio apartment they lived in, about stretching $700 a month to cover rent, utilities, food, and everything else. She told them about the accident, about her panic and her fear, about researching burn care on her phone and doing her best with limited resources. Why didn't you call 911 immediately after the accident? Jennifer asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Because I was terrified, Maria admitted. In my country, in Mexico, where I grew up, when you can't pay for medical care, sometimes they refuse to treat you. Or they treat you and then you owe money for the rest of your life. You lose everything. I know it's different here, I know there are programs, but I was scared and confused, and I thought I could handle it. I thought the burn wasn't that bad at first. By the time I realized how serious it was, I didn't know what to do. I was trapped by my own fear and my own mistakes. Miss Carter watched Jennifer's face carefully, trying to read what the social worker was thinking. She had heard stories about CPS, both good and bad. Cases where children were removed unnecessarily, families torn apart by bureaucracy and misunderstanding. But also cases where children's lives were saved by intervention, where abuse was stopped, where help arrived just in time. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jennifer said slowly, I can see that you love Maya very much. That's evident. But love alone isn't always enough. Maya has been suffering for months with an untreated serious injury. She could have died from this infection. In fact, if her teacher hadn't noticed something was wrong today, if she hadn't collapsed at school, she very well might have died. Do you understand how serious that is? Maria nodded, her face buried in her hands. Yes, I understand. I failed her. I failed my granddaughter. That's not what I said, Jennifer corrected, and there was something in her voice that made Miss Carter look at her more closely. I said that love alone isn't always enough. Sometimes we need help. Sometimes we need resources and support and intervention. The question now is what's best for Maya moving forward. Dr. Singh spoke up then. Maya is going to need surgery to debride the infected tissue and clean the wounds properly. Then she'll need at least a week in the hospital on IV antibiotics. After that, she'll need ongoing wound care, physical therapy to prevent contractures, and close medical follow-up for months. The bills are going to be substantial. I don't have substantial, Maria said bitterly. I don't even have a little bit. There are programs, Jennifer said. Emergency Medicaid, hospital financial assistance programs, charity care. We can help you navigate those. But I need to be honest with you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I have to file a report. There will be an investigation. A judge will review the case and determine what happens next. Maya's sobs intensified, and Miss Carter couldn't stay silent any longer. Can I say something? She asked, and all eyes turned to her. I'm Maya's teacher. I've only known her for 3 days, but I've been teaching for 7 years, and I've seen a lot of situations. I've seen children who come to school with bruises from being beaten. I've seen children who are emotionally abused, who are neglected out of indifference or cruelty. This isn't that. Anyone with eyes can see that this is a grandmother who loves her granddaughter and made terrible decisions out of fear and poverty. Punishing them by separating them isn't going to help anyone. Jennifer looked at her for a long moment. Miss Carter, is it? Yes. Emily Carter. Miss Carter, I appreciate your perspective, and you're not wrong about the love being evident. But my job isn't to punish or reward. My job is to ensure Maya's safety. And right now, I need to determine whether it's safe for her to return to her grandmother's care. What if there were resources? Miss Carter asked, the words tumbling out before she'd fully formed the thought. What if Maya's grandmother had access to help? What if she wasn't doing this alone? What do you mean? Jennifer asked, her pen pausing on the notepad. Miss Carter's mind was racing now, thinking about her church, about community organizations, about parent-teacher associations and local charities. I mean, what if we could put together a support system, make sure Maria has help navigating the medical system, accessing financial assistance, getting to appointments? What if we could ensure that Maya's care needs are being met without removing her from the only family she has? Jennifer's expression shifted into something that might have been hope mixed with skepticism. That's a nice idea in theory, Miss Carter, but in practice, informal support systems often fall apart. People mean well, but follow-through is inconsistent. Then make it formal, Miss Carter pressed. Isn't there some kind of safety plan or supervision agreement that could be put in place? Some way to monitor the situation without immediately jumping to foster care? Dr. Singh had been listening intently, and now she spoke up. Maya is going to be in the hospital for at least a week, possibly longer. That gives us some time to work this out before decisions have to be made about discharge. Jennifer nodded slowly, thoughtfully. That's true, Mrs. Rodriguez. During Maya's hospitalization, I'll be conducting a home visit, interviewing neighbors, reviewing your financial situation, and assessing your ability to meet Maya's needs going forward. If we can develop a solid plan that ensures Maya's safety and proper care, and if you comply fully with all medical recommendations from this point forward, It's possible that we could arrange for supervised reunification rather than immediate removal. The word possible hung in the air like a fragile thread of hope. Maria grabbed onto it with both hands. Yes, she said fervently. Yes, I'll do anything. I'll sign anything. I'll go to any class, any program, whatever you need. Just please, please don't take her away from me permanently. Miss Carter felt something loosening in her chest, a tiny bit of the crushing weight lifting. It wasn't a guarantee, wasn't a solution, but it was a chance. Sometimes that's all anyone could ask for. The next few days blurred together in a haze of hospital visits, phone calls, and fierce advocacy. Maya underwent surgery the day after her collapse, and Miss Carter was there in the waiting room with Maria, both of them sitting in uncomfortable chairs and drinking terrible coffee while surgeons worked to save infected tissue and clean wounds that should have been treated months ago. When Dr. Singh finally emerged, still in her surgical scrubs, her face was tired but cautiously optimistic. The surgery went well, she told them. We removed all the infected tissue we could find. The wounds are clean now, and we've started her on aggressive antibiotic therapy. She's young and strong, and if the infection responds to treatment, she should recover well. But there will be scarring, significant scarring, and she'll need physical therapy to maintain full range of motion in her shoulder and side. Maria nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. But she'll be okay. She'll live. Yes, Dr. Singh said, and the simple certainty of that word was like a miracle. She'll live. Miss Carter had hugged Maria then, this woman she barely knew, and felt the older woman's body shake with sobs of relief and residual terror. They were two strangers bound together by their love for one small girl, and in that moment Miss Carter made a silent promise that she would do everything in her power to keep this family together. She started making calls that same evening, first to Pastor Michael at her church, explaining the situation and asking if the congregation could help with medical bills and groceries. He didn't hesitate, immediately pledging support and promising to make announcements on Sunday. Then she called the principal at Riverside Elementary, explaining that she needed to take some personal days to help one of her students. Mrs. Henderson listened to the whole story and then quietly told Miss Carter to take whatever time she needed and that the school would cover her substitute teacher costs without question. She called her own mother, who had retired from social work 5 years earlier, but still had contacts throughout the county system. Her mother listened and then said something that stuck with Miss Carter. The system isn't designed for people like Maria Rodriguez. It's designed to catch the worst cases of abuse and neglect, not to support struggling families before they reach crisis point. You're going to have to fight for them, Emmy. You're going to have to be loud and persistent and annoying until someone listens. So that's what Miss Carter did. She fought. Jennifer Walsh conducted her investigation thoroughly. She visited Maria's studio apartment, noting that while it was small and the furniture was old, it was spotlessly clean. The refrigerator held food, mostly rice, beans, and vegetables, stretched to make every dollar count. Maya's corner of the single room was filled with books from the library and drawings she'd made, displayed proudly on the wall with tape. There were no signs of drug use, no evidence of other children being put at risk, no indicators of anything except grinding poverty, and one catastrophically bad decision made out of fear. Miss Carter accompanied Jennifer on some of these visits, bringing letters she'd collected from other teachers at Riverside Elementary, all of whom testified to seeing Maria at school events, always attentive to Maya, always involved despite her limited resources. The kindergarten aide remembered Maria volunteering to help make decorations for the school carnival, working for hours despite obvious pain in her back, just so she could contribute something since she couldn't afford to donate money. She's trying, Miss Carter insisted during one of her many conversations with Jennifer. She made a terrible mistake, but she's not a bad person. She's not an unfit guardian. She's just poor and scared and in over her head." Jennifer looked at her with tired eyes that had seen too many impossible situations. "Miss Carter, I believe you. I do. But my belief isn't what matters. What matters is what I can document, what I can prove to a judge, what kind of safety plan I can put in place that ensures Maya doesn't end up back in the hospital, or worse. The system I work within requires certain boxes to be checked." "Then let's check them," Miss Carter said firmly. "Tell me what you need, and I'll help make it happen." What they needed, it turned out, was a comprehensive support plan. Jennifer worked with Dr. Singh and the hospital's social worker to develop a detailed medical care schedule. Maria would need to bring Maya to weekly wound care appointments for at least 3 months. She would need to administer antibiotics on a strict schedule. She would need to attend physical therapy sessions twice a week and do exercises at home daily. All of this required time, transportation, and money that Maria didn't have. Miss Carter went back to her church, this time with a specific list of needs. Pastor Michael rallied the congregation in a way that restored her faith in humanity. Within a week, they had volunteers committed to driving Maria and Maya to medical appointments. The church's benevolence fund allocated money for co-pays and medications. 3 different church members who were nurses volunteered to do home visits to check on Maya's wound care and teach Maria proper technique. But it was more than just the church. When Miss Carter shared Maya's story with the other teachers at Riverside Elementary, carefully protecting identifying details but conveying the desperate need, the response was overwhelming. Teachers donated money from their own limited paychecks. The PTA organized a fundraiser. Parents sent gift cards for groceries and gas. The community rallied around a child they'd never met and a grandmother they didn't know, united by the simple recognition that this could happen to anyone, that poverty wasn't a moral failing, that sometimes people just needed help. The week Maya spent in the hospital, Miss Carter visited every day after school. She brought books and puzzles, colorful drawings from Maya's classmates, anything to make the sterile room feel less frightening. She sat with Maria during the long hours when the older woman couldn't afford to miss her own doctor's appointments, but didn't want to leave Maya alone. She was there when Maya cried from pain, when the physical therapist pushed her to move in ways that hurt, when the nightmares came and the small girl woke up screaming. And she was there for the small victories too. The day Maya's fever finally broke and stayed down. The day she smiled for the first time since the surgery. The day she sat up in bed and asked Miss Carter if she could come back to school soon because she missed story time. On the 5th day, Jennifer Walsh came for an official visit, her clipboard in hand and her expression unreadable. Miss Carter's heart hammered as the social worker pulled up a chair beside Maya's bed. Maria stood on the other side, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Maya, honey, I need to ask you some questions," Jennifer said gently. "Is that okay?" Maya nodded, her dark eyes serious and watchful. "Do you feel safe with your grandmother?" "Yes," Maya said immediately, her small hand reaching for Maria's. "Has your grandmother ever hurt you on purpose?" "No, never. It was an accident. I was playing too close to the stove even though she told me not to." "It was my fault." Jennifer's expression softened. "Maya, it wasn't your fault. Accidents happen, and they're not anyone's fault. That's why they're called accidents. But I need you to understand something very important. If you're ever hurt or sick, you need to tell an adult right away. You need to go to the doctor. Do you understand?" Maya looked at her grandmother, then back at Jennifer. "But what if we don't have money for the doctor?" The question, asked in such a small, serious voice, made Miss Carter's throat tighten with emotion. This 5-year-old child had been carrying the weight of her family's poverty, had suffered in silence because she understood, on some fundamental level, that medical care cost money they didn't have. Jennifer leaned forward, her professional mask slipping to show genuine compassion. Maya, there are programs to help people who don't have money for doctors. There are ways to get care even when you can't pay. Your grandmother knows about those now, and so do the people who are helping your family. But you, sweet girl, don't ever need to worry about that again. Your job is to be a kid and to tell grown-ups when something is wrong. Our job is to figure out how to help. Okay? Maya nodded slowly, processing this new information. Jennifer turned to Maria. Mrs. Rodriguez, I've completed my investigation. I've reviewed your home, interviewed your neighbors, consulted with the medical team, and assessed the support system that's been put in place. I'm recommending to the court that Maya be returned to your care under a supervised safety plan. The relief that washed over Maria's face was so profound that it was almost painful to witness. She swayed on her feet, and Miss Carter quickly moved to support her. However, Jennifer continued, and the word hung heavy in the air, this is contingent on several conditions. You must attend all medical appointments without fail. You must comply with all treatment recommendations. You must complete a parenting class focused on when and how to seek medical care. You must allow monthly home visits from my office for the next 6 months, and you must utilize the support system that's been established. If you miss appointments, if you try to handle medical issues on your own again, if there are any signs that Maya's needs aren't being met, I won't hesitate to remove her from your care. Do you understand? Yes, Maria said, her voice fierce with determination. Yes, I understand. I won't fail her again. I swear on my daughter's grave, I won't fail her again. Jennifer nodded, making notes on her clipboard. I believe you, Mrs. Rodriguez. And more importantly, I believe in the community that's formed around you and Maya. Miss Carter has been very persuasive in demonstrating that you won't be doing this alone anymore. She looked at Miss Carter then, and there was something like respect in her eyes. You should consider social work as a career, Miss Carter. You have the passion and the persistence for it. Miss Carter shook her head. I'm right where I need to be, with the children, catching the problems before they become crises when I can. 3 days later, Maya was discharged from the hospital. Miss Carter was there with balloons and a stuffed bear from her class. Maria had tears streaming down her face as she carefully helped Maya into the wheelchair, mindful of the bandages that still covered much of the child's back and side. The church volunteers were waiting in the parking lot with a car to drive them home, and Miss Carter followed in her own vehicle, carrying bags of medications and wound care supplies that the hospital had provided. The studio apartment looked different somehow when they arrived. The church had been busy. There was a new bed for Maya, donated by a family whose children had outgrown it. The tiny refrigerator was stocked with healthy food. There were new sheets, new towels, and a basket of toys and books on the floor. Maria stood in the doorway of her own home and wept at the kindness of strangers. Maya returned to school 2 weeks later. Miss Carter had prepared the other children, explaining in age-appropriate terms that Maya had been hurt and had to heal, that she might need extra gentleness, that she wouldn't be able to do everything they could do right away. The children, with the beautiful acceptance of the very young, simply welcomed her back with hugs and drawings and excited chatter about everything she'd missed. Miss Carter watched Maya carefully those first few days, noting how she still flinched sometimes, how she was slower to smile than other children, how the experience had marked her in ways that would take time to heal. But she also saw moments of pure childhood joy, Maya laughing during story time, Maya carefully painting at the art easel, Maya holding Sarah's hand during recess and actually playing, running carefully but freely in the autumn sunshine. 6 months passed. Maya's wounds healed, leaving scars that would fade with time but never entirely disappear. She attended physical therapy religiously, and her range of motion improved week by week. Maria completed her parenting class and never missed a single medical appointment. Jennifer Walsh conducted her monthly visits, and each time found a family that was struggling financially but thriving in all the ways that mattered. The church's support didn't waver. Volunteers continued driving Maria and Maya to appointments. The Benevolence Fund covered costs that Medicaid didn't, and slowly, Maria began to believe that asking for help wasn't weakness or failure, but wisdom and strength. Miss Carter remained involved, checking in weekly, celebrating Maya's victories, supporting them through setbacks. She watched Maya slowly transform from a terrified, trembling child into a little girl who could laugh and play and trust that the adults in her life would keep her safe. On the last day of the school year, Maya approached Miss Carter's desk with a drawing clutched in her small hands. It showed 2 figures holding hands under a bright sun, one tall and one small, both smiling. "This is you and me," Maya explained. "You saved me." Miss Carter knelt down, pulling the child into a gentle hug, mindful of the scars beneath her clothing. "No, sweetheart, you saved yourself by being brave enough to tell me you hurt. And your grandma saved you by loving you enough to accept help. I just helped connect the pieces." But as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. Sometimes connection was everything. Sometimes the difference between tragedy and hope was one person who paid attention, who noticed, who refused to look away from suffering. Sometimes salvation came in the form of a teacher who saw a child trembling in class and chose to look deeper, to ask questions, to fight for what was right. As the school year ended and summer began, as Maya and Maria settled into their new normal, supported by a community that refused to let them fall through the cracks, Miss Carter reflected on everything that had happened. She thought about how close they had come to losing Maya, how easily the child could have become another statistic, another preventable tragedy. She thought about all the other children like Maya who might be sitting in classrooms right now, suffering in silence, too scared or too young to ask for help. She thought about the families struggling in poverty, making impossible choices every day, falling through gaps in a system that was never designed to catch them. And she made a promise to herself that she would never stop looking, never stop asking questions, never stop fighting for the children who needed someone to see them. Because in the end, that's what it came down to. Being seen, being heard, being valued enough that someone would fight for you. Every child deserved that. Every family deserved that. Maya had been trembling in class, and one teacher had noticed. One teacher had cared enough to look beneath the surface and discover the truth. And that simple act of compassion had changed everything. If you've stayed with us through this entire story, thank you. Stories like Maya's happen every day in communities across this country and around the world. Children suffer in silence. Families struggle without support. But change is possible when people choose to see, to care, and to act. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below telling us what you think about Maya's story and how we as a society can better support vulnerable families. Subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss stories that matter, stories that shine light on real issues affecting real people. And if you're able, consider supporting organizations in your community that help families in crisis. Be the person who notices. Be the person who cares. Be the person who fights for those who can't fight for themselves. Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes the quietest suffering needs the loudest voice to bring it into the light.